Hey everybody, my name is Savannah and welcome back to my booktube channel. So today I want to talk about underrated books, primarily because one of the main goals of this channel is to sort of introduce people to books that they otherwise wouldn't be able to find. Because I think a lot of times people on booktube can just sort of recommend the same things over and over. And so it's kind of hard to find new books if you've already read those or if you're not interested in those. So I just kind of wanted to make this video to sort of kick off my channel. So without further ado, let's begin. The first book I want to talk about is Air Awakens by Elise Kava. Elise Kava in general I think is probably the most underrated author I have on my shelf because she deserves the whole world. I think Air Awakens is perfect for fans of Avatar. In fact, the way I pitch it is Avatar: The Last Airbender aged up if Katara was the last airbender and Zuko was the love interest. And I think that really does sum up this type of world and what this whole series is really about. Elise Kova is also really good at romance. This series in particular has a really good slow burn and like, oh boy, the drama, folks, the drama. There's a lot of angst. Aldrich, the love interest, is a little problem boy and I love him and I would die for him, and I just think everyone deserves to share in the joy that is Aldrich. And not only that, but all of the side characters are also treated with just as much respect as the main characters. And so like you get a whole bunch of like nuance and like they all have like their own stories and interests and that kind of thing to go with it, which means that the world itself just feels really well rounded out. And I think world building is something that Elise Kova does really well in general. And so I think that's something that a lot more people would enjoy and they should get on that. While I'm on the subject of Elise Kova, I actually want to talk about her other series. This is the first book in the Loom saga, The Alchemists of Loom. And this book has a lot of the same strengths as Air Awakens. However, I think with the Loom saga, what really sets it apart for me is that I've never read anything like this. Like, I've never read a book that has any sort of world building, anything like this. It's in its own sort of ballpark, and I think part of that is because there aren't any human characters, which is what I'm automatically used to, and not even, like, they're humanoid. So the main character is a Fenthri. This is Ari. And so like you can see she has gray skin, and so they're human in the sense that they don't have magic, but their culture is very sort of like cold and it revolves around like technology, and there's like a guild system, so there's 5 guilds and everybody sort of has like their specialty and that sort of thing. And then they also aren't super like big on like family bonds, but rather just like personal and individual bonds, which is just kind of strange for me. But Elise Kova does it in such a way that it really works, and it's like the characters literally all create their own families with like friends and that sort of thing. And then by comparison you have the dragons who live up on Nova, which is like a floating sort of country in the sky, and they use magic. And so like you have this huge comparison between like magic and science and like art and logic and that kind of thing. And I think it just comes together so beautifully, and I think, again, everybody should read this book and enjoy it. I also think it really is saying something because I really don't like steampunk, and although this book does have a pretty big steampunk aesthetic in it, I love it anyways, and so I think that really does say something. Along the same lines as The Alchemists of Loom, where I don't really read steampunk, I also don't really read dystopian anymore. I do like dystopian movies, but books not so much, and so it's a surprise to me that This Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada is actually one of my favorite books of all time, despite being a dystopian. As you can see, I've actually collected every edition that's come out so far, because I'm extra as hell. And so what This Mortal Coil does really, really well, that honestly is mind-blowing to me, is I am not a scientifically oriented person at all. And so when I first sort of heard about this book, I was a little bit worried because it sounded like it would have like a lot of like computer talk and like genetics talk, and it doesn't. So what this story is about is it takes place in the future. I don't know if we're ever actually given a date or anything like that, but in a future where genetics can be like hacked and are like implanted with technology, and so like biology and technology sort of like merge into one, and then a virus breaks out that's both like a tech virus and then like a physical illness as well, and it sort of has affected the whole world, and the whole world is like going into like a spiral basically. And so I was scared that I would get kind of lost in that since it would be so heavily featured, but I really think it is saying something that Elise Kava is such a good writer that she makes this all so accessible. And it's not just that like there's like the technology and the tech speak and all of that is there just for like plot purposes, but that it's like interwoven into the very, I mean, the literal fabric of the characters themselves, but also like the personality sort of stuff and like the world building and all of that. And so I think she does a really great job, and I think this book is also another one. I read it in less than a day, I think, so it's a fast read and it's fantastic and it'll ruin your life. Also, just shout out to the cover designer. When I first saw this, I kind of thought like, okay, that's not gonna have anything to do with the book, it's just like a random generic like colorful whatever. No, it's so specific to this book. Holy shit, read the first chapter. This next book actually goes quite kind of goes hand in hand with Air Awakens, or it's in the same sort of vein as that, and it's the Queens of Renthia series by Sarah Beth Durst. This one is also, it really does remind me of Avatar in a lot of ways. If I were to like pitch this, I would say that it is Avatar The Last Airbender meets James Cameron's like film Avatar, but with like bloodthirsty spirits that will rip you apart. And so I think that the series is so cool because again you have a really unique world. What I will say about this one is that what really makes it is the world, and like I really like the characters, but it's not relationship heavy at all. It's like really about sort of like the world and the magic system. And so the main character has the gift, like she has a gift where she can soothe spirits, and in a world inhabited where like every single object, like every plant, every rock, all of that is inhabited by a spirit that is literally trying to kill you. That's really important. And so the way she sort of grows up, it's she's like constantly trying to keep this balance alongside other kids who have these same abilities. What I also really admire about this is that magic is hard work. It's so hard. It's made very clear from the beginning that she is not the strongest one, but what she does do is she works really, really hard. She's constantly like studying, but like not in a boring way. So she's constantly studying and applying herself, and she finds ways to make the magic sort of work with her. So she's adaptable. So she finds her own ways to use the magic that are just as successful, but just different, and that don't rely on brute strength, which I really admire. And so I think that kind of emphasis that's put on like the world and the magic is really important in a fantasy book that is all about the world and magic. And so I think the execution is excellent, and I think a lot of people would enjoy it. Also, I love this cover. It's so beautiful, especially in real life, and I think it's an underrated cover too. So this next book I really debated putting in here, mostly because I really don't know how to describe it, and it is The Bird and the Sword by Amy Harmon. Now this is another one of my favorite books of all time, and I can't tell you anything about the plot or even really the characters, and I think the best way to sum this up is that the writing itself is the magic system, and it's gorgeous and it's poetic. What I can tell you is the main character is a girl named Lark, and she is effectively mute because she has the gift of naming, and so what she speaks can become is like literally manifested in the physical world and that kind of thing. So she's sort of been forced into being mute. It's actually been a while since I've read this book, and I honestly don't want to say any more than that other than the fact that this book is gorgeous and it's utterly unique, and I think everyone needs to read it. The next book I want to talk about is The Falconer by Elizabeth May, and I think this will be perfect for people who love Throne of Glass or The Shadowhunters. In fact, it's kind of like a mix between the two. But what I mean by that is that we follow a girl named Elina, and she watched her mother get murdered by a fairy like a year or two before. So she spent her whole time since training and training and training to go after these fairies. And these fairies are not Sarah J. Maas fairies. They're like the cruel Scottish bastards that are like twisted and will fuck you up. And she discovers she's a falconer, so she has some like innate sort of like fae abilities that like help her to fight them and that kind of thing. And so it's like a revenge mission. There's great action. It's also really feminist. If any of you follow Elizabeth May on Twitter, you know she's hilarious, and she frequently has like viral tweets just like going after misogynistic senators and that kind of thing, which is just a lot of fun, and that same kind of humor and like awareness comes through in her writing, which I really enjoy. But it's another really fast read, and then again the romance is so good, you guys. It's so good, and I think everyone would enjoy it. This last book is a vampire book, and again, vampire books are not ones that I read very often, but I think Holly Black gets a lot of credit for her fairy books, but The Coldest Girl in Cold Town is a vampire one, and I think it's really interesting, and it's also another one of those ones that's really unique within the genre. So for those of you who don't know, this book has been out for a while. So The Coldest Girl in Cold Town takes place in a world where vampires have basically been outed. Vampires go viral, basically. And so they sort of have this like cult celebrity type status in the world. And so the government has like grouped them up and created like cold towns where like if you get turned or bitten or anything like that, you have to go to a cold town, and it's basically just like Party City anarchy, essentially. It's like Las Vegas all the time except you die. That was a terrible description, but honestly I kind of think that's what this book is, and I think, I don't know, I really enjoy it, and I think more people should read it. Woohoo!